So here's a cost minimization in the long run question. We want to produce 200 units, 2,000 units of output, and we want to do it using the least costly combination of labor and capital. So we want to know, here's what we're using now, but what we want to know is, can we change our labor capital combination? Can we change our input combination and make that same output more cheaply? And so we want to know, if we hire more labor, we can fire some capital. Is that going to lower our cost, or should we hire some capital and fire some labor? We want to know, if we replace labor with capital or vice versa, is there a way we can make our costs lower? So that depends on how productive the inputs are relative to each other, but also how expensive the units are relative to each other. So the marginal rate of technical substitution tells us the productivity side. It says, if I hire one more worker, how much capital can I give up and keep my output exactly constant? If I hire one more worker, how much capital can I fire? Because that's the point of hiring the labor, is the labor is going to replace the capital. And I want to know, is this going to lower my cost of production? So to know that, I need to know, if I hire that one more worker, how much capital can I get rid of? In this case, it's 2 units of capital. A labor is twice as productive as a unit of capital. If I hire a worker, I can fire 2 units of capital, which sounds pretty great. Why not hire more workers? They're twice as productive as a unit of capital. But it also matters how expensive labor is relative to capital. In this case, a unit of labor costs $15 and a unit of capital only costs $5. So labor may be twice as productive as capital, but it's 3 times as expensive as capital. So if I hire a worker, I can fire 2 units of capital, but that's not going to save me any money, right? Because if I hire a worker, it's going to cost me $15. I fire 2 units of capital, that saves me $10. My cost would actually go up if I did that. I don't want to do that. Labor is more productive than capital, but it's even more expensive relative to capital. It's twice as productive, 3 times as expensive. Or, say it down here, the cost of one labor is $15, whereas cost of equally productive capital is 2. I need 2 capital to be just as productive, and each one costs $5 or 10. So this is the MRTS times the rental rate of capital. Each worker replaces 2 capital. Each one of those capital costs $5. So a unit of labor costs $15. An equally productive amount of capital costs $10. I want to use less labor. I want to replace labor with capital. I fire a worker. I replace that worker with 2 units of capital. I've saved $5. So I'll do that. Whichever input, so I want to know how productive is labor relative to capital. If I hire a labor, how much capital does a unit of labor replace? And then I want to know, how much does that labor cost relative to that equally productive amount of capital? Whichever one of these is smaller, that's what you want to use more of. In this case, use more capital, fire labor, and your costs are going to go down. That's why you change your input combination. There's a point I want to make that I saw a lot on your problem set, and I really want to emphasize. You don't change your input combination because you want to change your marginal rate of technical substitution. That's a result of changing your input combination. Yes, as I hire less labor, my marginal product of labor goes up. So I hire less capital, my marginal product of capital goes down. So my marginal rate of technical substitution does go up, and eventually it goes up to 3, and this ends up equaling 15. And in that case, a worker is just as expensive as an equally productive amount of capital, and then I'll stop. But I keep replacing labor with capital because labor is cheaper than is more expensive than an equally productive amount of capital. It's cheaper to use capital, and so that's why I do it. The result of that is that my marginal rate of technical substitution goes up. That's not why I do it, but that's what happens because of that. But I'm going to keep doing it as long as this is less than $15. I'm going to keep replacing labor with capital. But eventually I'm going to get to a point where it's going to take me 3 labors. I'm I'm sorry, a labor be as productive as 3 units of capital, and those 3 units of capital are now going to cost me $15, and now there's no cost savings. When these things are equal, when labor is just as productive relative to capital as it is expensive relative to capital, or said another way, same thing said another way, the cost of 1 unit of labor is exactly the same as the cost of an equally productive amount of capital, then there's nothing to be gained from altering your input combination. But as long as these are different, you can lower your cost of production by replacing the input that's more expensive with an equally productive, cheaper, with the input for which an equally productive amount of the input is cheaper.